بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamualaikum everybody. It's nice to, alhamdulillah, I'm grateful that I get to present this bayan this Friday, inshallah. A day, on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reserved to be a joyous day for the believers. And it is the same day on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created man, on which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam, and in which, for the first time in all of created history, all of the divine qualities, all the divine names were congregated and aggregated into a singular being, and that was a human being. And so Friday not only represents for us, Yom al-Jummuah, the day of congregation with our peers, but also the congregation of those divine qualities in man. And hence, a day in which we should strive to renew our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and renew our intentions with Him. And on this note of time, I didn't really quickly want to say before I jump to my topic, is that, increasingly we live in a time where time is being lost, as it were, right? The days are rolling into the other. We forget if it's even Monday or if it's Tuesday or Thursday. Friday, alhamdulillah, we have Jummuah, so we at least remember that. But time is, slipping and it's melting, as it were. And this is more or less because secular time, our dominant mode of time here in the West, is flat and it's meaningless, right? There's not much to it. Whereas time in our deen, the conception of time in Islam, isn't some flat linear quality, but is instead something that has a terrain, a topography. There is this sacred excitement, right? Every moment isn't like the next. Every week isn't like the next. Every month isn't like the next. Every month, every period of the year has some type of virtue that the previous moment didn't have. And so, alhamdulillah, we have come across, for those of you who aren't keeping up with the calendar, and that includes myself, I tend to get lost as well. We have just entered the 3 sacred months, right? We have just entered Dhul Qa'dah, and inshallah after this will be Dhul Hijjah and then Muharram. And then the 4th sacred month is Rajab, which is, a while away. But alhamdulillah, we've entered this moment of sanctity, right? And, our Prophet, he encouraged us to increase our fast in this time, increase our prayers, increase our good deeds, but at the same time to also conversely be vigilant of our bad deeds. Because in these moments, our bad deeds are also multiplied and amplified. Our sins are graver. Our transgressions are also more serious. And so, inshallah, let us make the intention to strive and take back time from the emptiness of secularity, and instead re-imbue it with the sacred excitement of Islam. That said, inshallah, I wanted to move on to my topic today, which is the importance of purifying our hearts. I just mentioned the whole host of ibadah that we should be doing in this time, including praying, fasting, giving zakat, charity, sadaqah, all these things. But we have to remember, brothers and sisters, all the time, that the ultimate end of all of religion, the ultimate objective of religion is the purification for the heart, right? Everything is a means to that. And if we were doing, our ibadah, our fasting, our sawm, etc., and we feel that our heart is stagnating, we feel like there's still disease in our heart, right? And we feel that these maladies of hypocrisy and, envy and pride are still stewing in there. We have to ask ourselves, is our ibadah working? Are we taking the means? Are we truly starting with the heart, right? Because outward actions are important, but it has to start with an inward movement. And so everything must begin with the heart. And our Prophet ﷺ, he said, famous hadith, that indeed in the body there is a morsel of flesh, right? And if it is sound, the whole body is sound. And if it isn't sound, then the whole body is not sound. And indeed, it is the heart. Famous hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And oftentimes, it is the case that people who have dead hearts, who have diseased hearts, those people tend to have unhappy hearts, right? And psychology and sociology has proven this time and time again. People who are busy in the dross of the dunya, who are consumed by consumerism and all these other kind of modern idols, as it were, those people tend to live very meaningless lives, or they're not as happy as they could be. Whereas those who are content, those who have the tranquility of God, those people don't tend to live tranquil lives and content lives. And so I want us to, inshallah, really brutally be honest with ourselves in these coming weeks and, for the rest of our lives, inshallah, about our sincerity with our heart, right? But being brutally honest with the state, our spiritual states, right? And because true sidq, right, this idea of honesty, right, isn't just being honest with those around us, right? It's also being honest with ourselves and being brutally honest and looking deep within our hearts. Is there a disease in there, right? Because the seduction of self-deception is so easy. It's so easy to fall into. That said, inshallah, I want to move on to kind of the primary text of what I want to look at. And that is this passage from Surah Al-Baqarah, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of offers us 3 successive parables. And from these 3 parables, I want to derive kind of 3 tips or 3 kind of steps we can take in order to work on purifying our hearts. 3 kind of things to keep in mind, inshallah. And I should kind of disclaim right here that these are by no means kind of like this, authoritative tafsir of these ayahs. I'm by no means a scholar of any sort, but I will say, but inshallah, these are just kind of reflections from these 3 parables. And insofar as they are reflections, they're by no means not exhaustible. So they're not a complete list of things you can do to purify your heart, nor are they perfect. So inshallah, hope there's benefit of some kind. And before I jump in, I would like to kind of start off by saying, talking about this trope of spiritual life, right? Throughout the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He demonstrates to us His incredible capacity, His omnipotence to raise life from death, right? To inject meaningless matter with vitality, right? And while He is proving to us that He can raise us up from the dead on Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? Which is a day that we should always keep in mind. He is simultaneously also highlighting to us the nature and the way in which He brings spiritual life into things that are once spiritually dormant, right? How He revives dead hearts. And so these 3 parables, inshallah, will have kind of tips on how we can access that revival in our hearts, inshallah. And so this passage begins at ayah 258 of Surah Al-Baqarah, so chapter 2 to verse 258. And the first kind of parable deals with this idea of confronting our ego. And this is instantiated in the parable of Ibrahim alayhi salam with the king, the tyrant king. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِي حَاجَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ آتَاهُ اللَّهُ. Have you not considered the one who disputed with Ibrahim alayhi salam when Allah gave him kingship, right? So there's this king, and Ibrahim alayhi salam goes to bring to him Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to show him the way. إِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّيَ الَّذِي يُحْيِي وَيُمِيتُ. When Ibrahim alayhi salam said to this king, "O king, my Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He brings life and He brings death." And then this king, he arrogantly replies, قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. Right? I bring life, I bring death. What are you talking about? And our commentators, they say that this king, he brings forth 2 men, and he executes he executes one, and he spares the other, as a way of kind of proving that he can bring life, bring death. And Ibrahim alayhi salam says, he responds to this kind of terrible response by saying, قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْتِي بِالشَّمْسِ. Right? Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who brings the sun from the east. فَأْتِي بِهَا مِنَ الْمَغْرِبِ. So bring it from the west, O king. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. And this king is like confounded. He doesn't know what to say, right? He can't bring the sun from the west. That's out of his influence. وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not guide the ones who put themselves in darkness, in wrongdoing. And so in this parable, Ibrahim alayhi salam, in a sense, represents to us our higher self, right? He represents to us this part of us that knows that Allah is our Lord, that we belong to Him. And this king represents our ego, our lower self, which is always tugging us and telling us we're the man, right? And this king, he is so self-centered, so self-contained about his dominion that he forgets who gave him his dominion. And atahu Allahul mulk, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him his kingship, right? And he does this thing, it's interesting, the linguistic part of the Quran, قَالَ أَنَا أُحْيِي وَأُمِيتُ. He substitutes where Allah should be with himself, ana, right? As if he is Allah, as if he assumes the position of God. And this is the greatest shirk, right? To impute upon yourself agency when you have none, right? When really you have none. So that is the magnitude of this man's arrogance, much like the magnitude sometimes of our own egos. And what does Ibrahim alayhi salam do in response to this egoism? he forces him to reflect. He tells him to look at the sun, right? Look at this beaming natural phenomenon. You see that sun? Who put it there? You certainly didn't put it there, because if you did, you'll be able to move it, to the west, right? But you can't. And the king gets confused. The ego gets confused, right? And why this confusion? That's because the egoism, brothers and sisters, is a rational absurdity. It doesn't make any sense, right? It is as clear as the sun, as the day, that we are anything but self-made man. That we did anything but pull ourselves up from the bootstraps, as it were. They say in America, the American trope. This idea that we're self-made man, it's ridiculous. No, you're not. No, you're not. And one just simply has to reflect, right? Just for a brief period of time on the blessings of his life. Who were you born to? Where were you born? All these things, all these variables that were out of your control. Allah was in control, not you. And his divine mercy and his divine gifts were the reason of where you are today. And so the ego is a rational absurdity. And Ibn Attallah, he says, our great sage of this tradition, he says, rahimahullah, that nothing benefits the heart except seclusion, from which you go into the planes of reflection, right? The planes of reflection. Because in reflection, our ego becomes kind of dismantled, right? And it's really interesting, the linguistic kind of pun here, fikr, right? This idea of reflection is kind of the opposite of kufr, right? You take the fa and the cat and you reverse them, fikr and kufr. And the idea being kind of, fikr is the cure to kufr, right? Kufr is this lack of thinking, this covering of your rationale, and this ego wants to be kind of the super person. But your rationale, when you think, when you contemplate, you realize that your egoism is nothing but an absurdity, right? And so, inshallah, take some time every day to engage in contemplation, to reflect 10, 15 minutes every day, to think about the blessings in your life, to think about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how his hand has been acting in every single moment of your life, and how you've been blessed to be where you are. And inshallah, through that, you will slowly begin to deflate your ego and sink into humility. And this idea of humility, having a humble heart, really is key. And it's kind of a thread that goes through these three kind of parables of a humble heart, right? Because hard hearts don't enter Jannah. As Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a man who even has an atom's weight of arrogance will not enter Jannah, right? And this is something you really think about. And I really want to emphasize this, that if we even have an atom's weight of pride in our hearts, that's a dangerous thing, dangerous thing. And so that's the first kind of step or tip, to reflect, to cast out our ego. The second thing that comes along with the second parable is to balance fear and hope, right? And this is instantiated in the parable of the man who passes by a city, right? And he sees a city, it's a city that has been decimated. The life has been sucked out of it, right? And he sees the city and he says, "Anna yuhyi hadhihi Allahu ba'da mawtiha." How could Allah, right? He's so depressed by the state of the city. He's like, how could Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bring life to the city? And in that moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes him die. Allah causes this man who sees the city and despairs, and he causes him to die for 100 years. And he raises him back up. And he asks this man, how long were you out? How long were you dead? And this man just says, just a day or two, I think I took a nap, right? And then Allah says, no, you were dead for 100 years, right? And look to your donkey, right? Our commentators say by this point, the donkey that he was riding on to the city had dissolved into kind of a pile of bones, right? And Allah before him, in this amazing, miraculous moment, he puts the flesh back onto this donkey and shows him how he can put life back to death. And this man says, and when this became clear to him, Allah's omnipotence became clear to him, he said, I know that Allah can do anything. He can do anything. And so once again, in this parable, this dead city represents another instance of spiritual death, right? That, this idea that the city is so dead that this man despairs. How, right? How could Allah bring this back to life? And in a similar way, so too do we feel about our hearts sometimes. And, few of us can say that we're always on a spiritual high. That is a station almost for the spiritual elite. But most of us, we go through phases, right? We have spiritual depressions, as it were. And during these moments of spiritual depression, we feel distant from Allah. We don't feel like we're remembering him. Our ibadah doesn't feel as on point, right? We begin to despair of our distance from the divine, rahimahullah, or Azza wa Jal. And Allah is telling us in this parable that even if your heart is dead for 100 years, Allah can bring life back to it. Yes, He can do that. That is the nature of His mercy. And this, kind of this number 100, it's interesting. It reminds me of this other hadith of the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he narrates of a man who murdered 100 people, right? This man was a mass murderer, and he murdered 100 people. And because he was penitent, because he wanted to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah forgave him, right? Which is incredible, because in this life, he had this, one could say he was spiritually very dead, right? He was creating death, was how dead he was, in a sense, right? But Allah gave him life in the hereafter, because he was penitent, and because he had some kind of modicum of hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what we have to be. We have to be hopeful in the mercy of Allah during these moments of spiritual despair, of distance we feel with the divine. And that's why we make dua in the Fatiha. We say, Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Guide us onto the straight path of those who you have blessed, right? It is a prayer of hopefulness. But at the same time, we have to balance that with fear, right? Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bring life to death, He can bring death to life. Just as He brought death to that man in whom vitality was coursing through his veins, that in a moment, in an instant, Allah caused him to die for 100 years, right? And Allah can do the same to our hearts. He really can. And so we have to balance this idea of hope and fear in our hearts. And the thing is, it's a balancing act, right? And, for those of you who've seen, been to the circus, I suppose, and seen the tightrope, walk the tightrope, he isn't just like, kind of walking it. He's present. He's 100% focused on balancing, right? And he's so present that he walks a line. He walks a straight line, the sirat, right, as it were. This sirat that we're trying to tread, the straight path of God, isn't easy to walk. You have to be present. You have to keep, be cognizant of being straight. And that brings me to my second kind of cure, right, second tip, and that is dhikr, right? Dhikr is really interesting. Well, in this parable, the reason I bring up dhikr is because this man, when he sees Allah's omnipotent kind of power, he says, qala. He physically verbalizes his realization of Allah's qudra, of Allah's might. He says, qala a'lam wa anna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. He says, I know Allah with His tongue. And there's this intimate connection between the tongue and the heart. That so as long as the heart is at least initially activated, right, the tongue will inshallah amplify the spiritual effect. And really interesting point about dhikr, this word dhikr is actually related etymologically to this idea of like masculinity, dhakr, right? We say a man is a dhakr in Arabic. And the reason this is because a man, when only a man can really sense that acute pain that he gets from getting kicked, in his private parts. And in that moment, he becomes present, right? The pain is so acute that he is fully in the moment, and hence this idea of presence. And dhikr, right? Dhikr makes us present. It brings us in the moment. So we are focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, interesting etymological note. Anyways, moving on. The third parable I want to focus on highlights this importance of dua, right? That we need to make dua. We need to make dua for the rain of His rahmah on our hearts, to unify our hearts. And this is instantiated in the third parable of Allah, in the third ayah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to Ibrahim alayhi salam, or Ibrahim alayhi salam is talking to Allah. And Ibrahim alayhi salam asks Allah, Rabbi arini kayfa tuhyil mawta. Ya Allah, show me, how do you bring life to death, right? And there's a lot that's happening in this parable. Inshallah, I won't discuss everything, but there's a discourse that happens, and Allah eventually says, قَالَ فَخُذْ أَرْبَعَةً مِنَ الطَّيْرِ. Allah tells Ibrahim alayhi salam to take 4 types of birds. فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ ثُمَّ اجْعَلْ عَلَى كُلِّ جَبَلٍ مِنْهُنَّ جُزْءًا. And cut these birds up into different pieces, right? So essentially kill the bird and take fractions of them and put them on different mountains. ثُمَّ اجْعَلْ عَلَى كُلِّ جَبَلٍ مِنْهُنَّ جُزْءًا. Right? Go onto different mountains and just put these birds, and you can imagine Ibrahim alayhi salam, he probably got a workout in, going up one mountain, coming down the mountain, going up another mountain, etc. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ ادْعُهُنَّ يَأْتِينَكَ سَعْيًا. Right? And then call upon these different fragments of these birds, and they will come and unify into one single being, right, before you. And they did, right? And this is the parable. And so, in a sense, these birds, the fragments of these birds, represent our fragmented heart, right? Our fragmented heart is stuck, it's staked to the dunya on these different mountains, right? And it's interesting that these are on mountains, right? Because mountains, elsewhere in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا, that these mountains are like stakes, they're stuck into the dunya. And so these fragments of our hearts that are stuck to the dunya, they're staked in, right? And they won't come up. And another thing about mountains, that mountains, you know, for those who hike, I don't do it a lot, but for those who hike, mountains go very high, right? And altitude can be quite large, and it takes a lot of climbing. But the thing is, so as long as you are contiguous with the ground, so as long as you're staked into the dunya, you'll never fly, right? You'll never defy gravity. And only when your heart is unified, right? When the fragments become one singular live whole, can you fly like the bird? Can you begin to defy gravity? And you can begin to sing the song of the bird, which is the song of creation, which is his praise, Azza wa Jalla, subhanallahi wa bihamdi, right? And so what's important for us here, though, is what is that critical ingredient that unifies our hearts, right? Because that is what we're after. And that is thumma durhun. When Allah tells Ibrahim alayhi salam to make dua, to call upon these birds. Obviously we call upon Allah, but the idea is the same word is being used, dua, right? And you know, we make a lot of dua, I think. And a lot of times we make a lot of dua for the dunya. I know personally myself, right? This last Ramadan, I remember all I was making dua for was my GPA, my grades, my job, my internship, etc., right? And you know, we get so caught up in climbing the corporate ladder, the academic ladder, but we forget about the ladder to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We forget about our ascension to the absolute, which is Him, Azza wa Jal. And how often do we sincerely, right? I really mean this. How often do we sincerely make dua for our heart, right? Do we get down and we ask Allah, Ya Allah, please, you know, purify our hearts. And it's interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or that we, you know, this idea of dua, our Prophet he said that a dua mukhul ibadah, that dua is the essence of worship. And another narration, a dua huwa ibadah, dua is worship, right? There's a direct connection. And it begs the question, like, what is this idea of dua then? That it forms the very crux of worship. And there are two aspects of dua. The first is this outward aspect, in which we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Him, we just ask Him, right? We put kind of the exclamation mark at the end of our sentence, as it were. And if that is the extent of our dua, just that outward aspect, then we're kind of like children at a candy store asking for candy from our parents, right? Really, and I'm not joking. If that is the extent of our dua, that we were just simply asking Him kind of lazily, we were like children. And Ibn Ata'ala, this great sage we mentioned, I quoted earlier, he says regarding this that if your dua lacks the inward quality and is simply this outward calling on Allah, right, then it is like an accusation, right? It is like an accusation. And so the second quality, that is the reality of dua, is its inward quality, right? And this inward quality is this declaration of this absolute neediness and poverty before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we are totally dependent before Him, right? That nobody can supply us with anything except Him. Ya ayyuhan nasu antumul fuqara ila Allah. Oh mankind, you are impoverished, right? You're poor before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so let's inshallah, you know, when we make dua, especially particularly for our hearts, let us not kind of just bump around lazily, right? And, you know, put our hands up, etc. But let us come to Him broken and submissive and brittle, right? And ask Him to unify our hearts. So inshallah, those are the three parables I wanted to explore. And just to recap really quickly, the first one was confronting our ego with reflection, right? Reflection is the weapon against the ego, because the ego is in rational absurdity. And the second, inshallah, is to balance hope and fear, and to do this and conduct this balancing act with the act of being present via dhikr, right? Keeping dhikr moist on our tongues. And it's interesting, dhikr and fikr, they rhyme, right? Fikr being contemplation, dhikr being, you know, dhikr, remembrance. And so, you know, those two come hand in hand, inshallah. You know, just take 10, 15 minutes out of your day to do dhikr or do some fikr or do them both at the same time. Inshallah, it will be a benefit. And the last thing is to make a lot of dua, right? Make dua sincerely to Allah that He guides you and unifies your heart, right? And to do it sincerely with this deep understanding that nothing can come except through Him. So with that, inshallah, I'll conclude. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He harmonizes our heart to the tune of His oneness, for only He can do it. Only He Azza wa Jalla can do it. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And with that.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya Allah, You have promised us that we will be tested with our wealth and our children, with fear and hunger and failing health, in prosperity and in want, in loneliness and in connection, by the bonds of love that tie us to this world. Let us not be among those whose passing contentment blinds them to eternal truth. Grant that our sense of fragility drive us to seek strength in you. Grant that our attachment in this life become doorways leading to your sacred presence. Ya Allah, you promised us that we will be tested with the chance to do righteous deeds or leave them undone, with the chance to speak truthful words or leave them unspoken, with the chance to rise in defense of the weak or stand by while they suffocate. Let us not be among the munafiqeen who promise help and then withdraw it. Grant that we stand witness to the injustices of this world and counter them with a shahada of justice. Grant that we enter into necessary confrontations and repulse malice with the steady strength of taqwa. Ya Allah, replace for us indecision with clarity, fearfulness with resilience, cynicism with sincerity, petulance with patience. You are the bulwark of the righteous, the ark of salvation, the light of our inward eyes. Make us calm, make us steadfast, bearers of your hope, vessels of your rahmah, breath of your sakina. Ya Allah, in the footsteps of our Master Muhammad, by the brightness of your Masumin, draw us ever closer to you. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.